Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is January 3rd, finally 2025. Happy New Year to everyone out there, but... We have a great show to start the new year for you. We're going to get to all of the quarterfinal games. We'll start with the Texas and Ohio State game, get to those first. Two incredible games in Atlanta and in Pasadena, especially that one over in Atlanta. Not without a little bit of controversy, and we'll get to that. Then we'll talk about Penn State and Notre Dame, getting pretty comfortable wins. Notre Dame had to worry just a little bit longer than Penn State did in this one, but really remarkable games from both of them, and they will end up meeting up down there in Miami. Then we'll take that early look at those semifinal games, Texas, Ohio State in Dallas, as well as Notre Dame, Penn State down there in Miami. We'll get to a little of a bowl season recap. The SEC is starting to falter just a little bit. A lot of things to talk about around that, and we'll get into a little bit more detail next week for sure. And then we'll do a little bit of a weekend roundup. Transfer portal news, coaching carousel news, all of that type of stuff. Want to make sure that's on y'all's radar before we get out of here for the week. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, you can click that $, add any question, comment you like. It'll pop up on the screen, and we can have fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be as interactive as possible, so utilize that. We can have fun back and forth and ask any questions you like. And I have to assume some people will have some questions about this first game. Texas-Arizona State was absolutely insane. It went down to the wire a couple of different times, and Texas found a way to get away with one. Andrew Makuba makes a great play on the ball in double overtime, gives them the pick, they win the game, and what a performance from Cam Skattebo, what a performance from Quinn Ewers to finish off that game. This is what the CFP was meant to give us. It was meant to give us a team in Arizona State that, going into this game, was the biggest spread of the entire of all the games this upcoming week, and you were looking down the barrel saying, they probably can't keep up with Texas too much, at least not for 4 quarters. And they went out there and they battled. They battled incredibly hard, and usually I'd start with the winner. Usually I'd start talking about Texas and what they did in this game and what they did well, what they did poorly, and there was plenty of both, but I got to start with Cam Skattebo. He was the most incredible player in this game, ran for 143 and 2 scores, was the leading receiver with 8 catches and 99 yards, including that huge one down the sideline, threw for a touchdown of 42 yards. He was everything. And in that 42-yard touchdown pass, sounds like it was designed to go back to Sam Leavitt. Sam Leavitt got a little bit injured the play before. Cam Skattebo said, I'll throw it, and he threw it perfectly. It was absolutely insane. Remarkable performance from him. Sam Leavitt fought his butt off during that game, got away from pressure just about every single down. Didn't necessarily have the best statistical day, but I came away thinking much higher of Sam Leavitt than I did going in. Remarkable player, fought incredibly hard in this game, and ran probably about 10 miles without running forward very much. So really remarkable game from him. Both these players, just incredible guys. Incredible kids, incredible players, and definitely guys that have kind of set Arizona State off on this path. And we'll have plenty of time to really get into what the future holds for Arizona State, because I think it could get really special down there in Tempe. But this game was everything that they are all season. They fought really hard. Cam Skattebo made every single play you could possibly want him to make. They came up just a little bit close in overtime, and there were a lot of different reasons for that. Now, the big reason why they were even in overtime is Texas has a third quarter issue. There's no doubt about that. They had 10 total yards. They got outscored 5-0 with that safety in that third quarter. They have some issues, and they have to figure it out. It comes down to a little bit of play calling with Steve Sarkisian pushing the ball downfield at some weird moments during this game, one leading to that pick on Quinn Ewers, and then a lot of it just has to do with their inability to run the ball. They went for 1.8 yards per carry in this game, couldn't get any rhythm going running the ball, and when you can't do that, Quinn Ewers is not going to be all that effective until the final 5 minutes of this game, apparently. Quinn Ewers went 11 for 14, 160 yards, 2 scores in 5 minutes in last 5 minutes of the game and overtime. Remarkable game from Quinn Ewers towards the end of this game. Definitely had some shaky moments early, but overall, you throw 16 passes in the first 55 minutes of the game, then you throw 14 in the last 5 minutes in overtime. You're probably more likely to do a little bit more better with the rhythm when you get to those last 14. So overall, really incredible game from him. He took over when they absolutely needed it, especially on that 4th and 13. Incredible ball, an incredible route run by Matthew Golden, incredible pickup by the offensive line, which Quinn Ewers has a lot to do with as well. So really remarkable game, really remarkable finish from him, but Texas has some things they have to figure out when it comes to that third quarter and just letting teams back in games that they probably have no business being in. They were up 16 points, and then you see Arizona State just slowly start to claw their way back in. Texas allowed them to do that, so they got to figure that stuff out, and we got to talk about this. This is obviously the thing that kind of take Twitter by storm during this game. A lot of people very, very angry about this one, and I fully understand that. It should have been targeting. I'm not here to tell you that it wasn't targeting. I'm not here to, argue one way or the other. What I will say is there are two things that I've seen online that I just don't agree with in any way. One is ASU lost this game because of this play. Two is it was rigged for Texas. I understand that this was a huge play. Arizona State would have kept the drive going. They possibly would have had a chance to kick a field goal. The possible part of that is why they didn't lose this game because of this. They had plenty of chances after this game, or after this play, including that 4th and 13 where you just knock the ball down, you win the game. So this is not why Arizona State lost. It did have a huge effect on the game. I'm not here to tell you that it didn't. Definitely was not necessarily rigged for Texas either. That's another thing that I've seen out there. I saw plenty of missed calls on both sides of the field in this one, including that Isaiah Bond play. If this one is targeting, I would argue that one is targeting as well. So it's a battle back and forth. I understand this was a huge play. I understand it's going to get a lot of different publicity, but overall, I really don't think that this one was the most egregious, or might have been the worst call of the day. I'm not necessarily saying it wasn't. I was saying there was a ton of missed calls throughout this game. I think this referee crew probably should stay pretty far away from the semifinal games if I had to imagine, but overall, I don't think this was the defining play of this game. I don't think it lost Arizona State the game. I do think it hurt them quite a bit, and I do think it probably should have been called, along with a lot of different things that probably should have been called in this game. So overall, this refereeing crew probably just shouldn't be around the semifinal games, and we should probably find a way to figure out what is targeting and what isn't, because I don't think anyone knows, including the referees on the field. That's a huge problem, and we'll talk about that definitely next week at some point. But overall, really incredible game, an awesome finish where at the end of the game, Quinn Ewers was just the best guy on the field. He made every single play you needed to make. He made the huge throw on 4th and 13, followed it right up with a touchdown to Gunnar Helm, threw some great balls to Matthew Golden throughout this game, who was downright remarkable, becoming the best player on that Texas offense. So really good stuff from both teams. Remarkable stuff what Arizona State did, and where they go from here, I think I can't express how much I love Kenny Dillingham, how much I love this Arizona State team, and how much I think they're capable of. They left everything out on that field. They left every single play call, every single piece of vomit they had, every single energy they had in this game. They left out there on the field. That is what playoff games are about. They knew physically they were a little bit overmatched in this game. Now, their defensive line played incredibly well, and huge amount of respect to them. Definitely something we need to talk about with Texas going forward, but overall, they knew they were a little bit outmatched. They pulled out a fake punt. They pulled out, different fake, the halfback pass. They pulled out so many different things that they left everything out there. And this is a program that not only can dominate the Big 12 over the next little bit, but can dominate on the national scale for a little bit over the next couple of years, because there's some special talent over there in Arizona. And then Texas, this was just avoiding disaster. There's no doubt about that. This game probably should have ended in regulation. 2 chances to win it with a field goal. You miss them both. You have the pick with 5 minutes to go. A lot of issues. And they're going to have to play worlds better if they're going to want to beat this team, who, oh my goodness, if this is not the best team in the country, I don't know who is. Because the reality is, when Will Howard is playing that level, this team is going to beat everyone by 14 points. They're going to roll to a national title, and we're going to look back saying, how did they lose that Michigan game? But that's just what the game is about. That's what that game is kind of built off of, is you never know what to expect. But overall, really remarkable game from Ohio State, and it was this guy. You have to imagine that it was going to be number 4, 7 catches, 187 yards, 2 scores. He's not only the best wide receiver in the country, he might be the very best player in the country going into 2025. He is an outright alien. We probably should check his DNA to see if he's actually human, but he does not abide by normal physics. He's an absolute freak, and he's someone that if you wanted to draft him, I'd draft him number 1 overall. I'd go ahead and fit him for a golden jacket, because you're just going to have to hold it for another 15 years, and then he'll be ready to put it on. This kid is absolutely ridiculous, and the fact that we get him for another 2 years in college football is just an absolute treat. But he wasn't the only one that had an incredible day. This defensive line for Ohio State got after him pretty much from start to finish. 8 sacks, 13 tackles for loss for this Ohio State defense, 5.8 yards per carry. remarkable stuff. The O-line did show a couple more holes than they did against Tennessee, but overall, really remarkable stuff from this offensive and defensive line, and they won the place that they won in the Tennessee game, and people were pretty surprised in the trenches. They were able to do it again against Oregon. But the mentality of this team is probably the biggest thing that has stood out for me, because you look at what this team is capable of. The talent on the field is undeniable. It is the most talented team in the country. It is the team that has two of the best wide receivers in the country, two of the best running backs, one of the better quarterbacks, really, really talented players all across the field, and they're ready to rip people to pieces. They are ready to take their foot all the way off the brake, put it all the way on the gas, and just tear people apart. And they really can do that. And the biggest part of that is Will Howard. He's playing incredibly good football, and probably playing the best football that I've seen him play in his career. Had over 300 yards, 3 scores in this game. Definitely been the best quarterback in the playoffs thus far. But for Oregon, it's a really tough way to end a remarkable season. There's no doubt about that. They've played really, really good football this year. They've been the most consistent team in the country. They ran into a buzzsaw. There's really no other way to put it. And obviously, brings into question the CFP format. I think they got a little bit hurt by the way that this thing shook out, and we'll definitely be talking about that a little bit more. Frankly, I think these last couple of weeks have almost ensured that we're going to go to a 16-team playoff at some point here pretty soon, so we'll talk about that likely next week, get into a little bit more detail, but definitely something where Oregon just ran into the wrong team at the wrong time. This Ohio State team is going to be incredibly hard to stop. Even if Texas plays their A-plus football, they could still lose this game by 10 points. So it's not necessarily anything against Oregon. It was not their day. As Dan Lanning said it was definitely Ohio State's day, and as Dan Lanning said, it wasn't against Michigan. So just one of those things, and definitely a tough ending to just a remarkable season for Dylan Gabriel and the Ducks. But this Ohio State team is different in every sense of the word. We knew it coming into the season that they might just have a little bit more talent, a little bit more ability across their team than pretty much anyone else in the country. We saw it from the defense for about the entire year. They're one of the best defenses in the country. They might be facing the best defense in the country here pretty soon, but overall, we didn't really see it from the offense. It was a little bit inconsistent, a little bit all over the place, and came down to Will Howard, came down to play calling in a lot of ways. Now Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are letting it rip. Now Will Howard's letting it rip, and it's going to be a terrifying unit to face the rest of the way. Right now, if they play at that level, they're going to be your national champions. I feel fairly confident in that. But where they go from here, I think Oregon, it's still a program growing. I understand it's been a frustrating end to the last couple of years, but Dan Lanning is building this team. They're getting more talented every single year. I don't know what the quarterback situation will be in 2025. I don't know if they'll go get a portal guy. I don't know if they'll roll with Dante Moore, but this is a team that is not going anywhere. I can almost promise you that. This defense is only going to get better next year, and Dan Lanning is going to get that offense in the right place. I think Oregon's still on the right track. Obviously, it was a very, very tough day, but remarkable team still heading very much in the right direction. For Ohio State, you're off to Dallas and just continue to be in attack mode. That's the reality of this situation. If Ohio State and Will Howard just continue to attack defenses over and over and over again, especially to number 4, they're going to have a lot of success. They're going to win the national title, and they might just win it by a comfortable margin, if I'm being totally honest with you. This team is, if they play at that level, is far and away the best team in this tournament, and they were far and away the best team on that field a couple of days ago. So, remarkable games from these two teams. That Texas game had a little bit of controversy. There's no doubt about that. I understand that. Definitely was not the call that I would have gone with. There were a couple of calls that I would have gone differently from them. So a lot of different things to talk about with those two games, but let's move forward. Let's take our first break and let's talk about the Penn State and Notre Dame games. Really remarkable games, two games that both teams relatively handled their business, moved on about their day, and they get to meet down there in Miami. But let's talk about those games right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those two games in Atlanta as well as in Pasadena. Texas escapes with a win in double overtime. Ohio State just takes Oregon to the woodshed for 4 quarters. Remarkable game from the Buckeyes, and they look like a rolling boulder that's going to be really hard to stop. But let's talk about the other two games. Penn State handles business against Boise State. Notre Dame just out-executes Georgia pretty much from start to finish. Let's start with that Penn State game, though. A little bit more digestible, a little bit easier to break down, and that Penn State team has so many things you have to love. They can beat you in a number of different ways. They run the football really aggressively. Drew Aller can put the ball on a dime when he really needs to. This defense absolutely flies around, especially that defensive line is an absolute problem. They're a really, really good team. Now, there was a little bit of issue in the second half. A lot of people have talked about this already. They got a little bit cute. I think Andy Kotelnicki got a little bit cute with this one. Just run power over and over and over again. You'll probably win this game pretty comfortably, not with that little bit of a scare halfway through the third quarter. But overall, remarkable game from this team. Obviously, they continue to build. Drew Aller continues to play really good football. And when you have that two-headed monster that they have, you're going to have a really hard time stopping this team. Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton went for 29 carries, 221 yards in this game, and the way that I put it on my Twitter was Kaytron Allen threw a bunch of body blows, and then Nick Singleton threw the haymaker. He was the one that threw the knockout punch in this game. The 56-yard touchdown put this one fully away, but there was a moment there in the second half where Boise State really started to battle back in this one, got within 3 points, and then Penn State really took over. They went on the 5-play touchdown drive. They got the interception from Zakee Wheatley, and then they went down on this touchdown drive. So really remarkable stuff from those running backs. They lead the way for this offense as far as I'm concerned, because Drew Aller's absolutely incredible. He made some throws in this game. He was a little bit inconsistent at times, had a little bit over 50% completion, had those 3 scores, which are really remarkable, 2 absolutely beautiful passes to Tyler Warren as well as Amari Evans, and Amari Evans is a guy we're going to have to watch going into the next round, making a ton of plays on the outside, but overall, I think it's fair to say that consistency is something they're probably going to need going forward. You're probably not running the ball for 5.3 yards per carry on Notre Dame, so definitely something to watch. Obviously, if they can do that, if they can run the ball for 5 yards per carry, they will continue to do that in that game. But overall, they're probably going to need a little bit more consistency from this past game, and I think they're a team that really has the ability to do that. They need to open it up with the run game. That's going to be a little bit tougher to do against Notre Dame than it was against Boise State. But overall, the defensive line is the other thing we have to talk about. Ashton Jeanty had 104 yards on 30 carries in this game. I think the biggest one he had was a 26-yard carry. Other than that, it was absolutely tough sledding. They were dominating that offensive line from start to finish. I did not come out of this game worrying a little bit more about Ashton Jeanty, just thought a little bit better about this Penn State defensive line. They got after him from start to finish. Ashton Jeanty did just about everything he possibly could have, but at the end of the day, when that offensive line is getting beat the way that they were, there's no way you're going to have a ton of success. So overall, remarkable game from Penn State. If you're Boise State, it was a remarkable year. You missed the mark by a little bit at the end. You had one of the best players, maybe the best player in the country, depending on who you ask. He had a historic season, came up a little bit short of that Barry Sanders record, but it was remarkable to watch this team go to work. And it was remarkable to see Maddox Madsen step up to the plate in a couple of the games down the stretch. Really good team. I think they're still heading very much in the right direction, but Penn State, you handled the business you needed to handle. The reality was, if you lost this game or the SMU game, you were going to get torn to pieces online. That's the reality of the situation that you were in. People keep saying you had the easiest path there. You still have to win the games. I'm not taking anything away from what Penn State has been able to do, but the reality is you handled the business that you were supposed to handle. Now it's time for the big boy show. Now it's time for Notre Dame down there in Miami, and you're going to have to get a big win in that one if you really want to change the narrative around your team going forward. But overall, really remarkable game. Both these teams feel like they're heading in the right direction. Boise State, obviously, you are losing Ashton Jeanty going into 2025. Sire Gaines is a fantastic player, and his next up around there in that running back room. Cannot wait to see what he can do in 2025. And Maddox Madsen will be heading into his junior year. As long as he's still around Boise, he's going to be a very talented player and get only better. He's gotten a ton better throughout this year, and cannot wait to see what Spencer Danielson can do in 2025. Maybe just another CFP trip, who knows? was. And then for Penn State, they head down to Miami, huge chance to get to the national title. I mean, it's about as big of a chance as they've had in a really long time around there, especially when James Franklin has been there, and they have 60 minutes in front of them against a very, very good team, and I think it's going to be remarkable to watch what this team can do at the next game. And honestly, I think there is a world where Texas might have gotten over that hump in the back half of that game. I've said that a couple of different times for Texas, so it's hard for me to feel confident about Texas really remotely going forward. But we'll talk about that game here in a second, break down some of the things to watch for in that Ohio State-Texas game. But Notre Dame, Georgia, remarkable stuff from this Notre Dame team. They played incredible football. Before we jump in, actually, apologies here, but want to send my thoughts and condolences to everyone that was affected by the attacks over there in New Orleans. Horrifying moment, obviously much bigger than the CFP game. Very happy everyone was safe and healthy after that moment. Terrifying moment there. Hope everything is handled, obviously, and obviously something that they had to push this game back. Definitely the right decision to make. Both these teams were safe throughout that time, and they were able to play this game. And then Notre Dame kind of took over. This was the win that kind of eluded Notre Dame for quite some time, and Gunnar Stockton was not the reason that Georgia lost this game. If I showed you this score on Monday, you probably would have said Gunnar Stockton's going to be a problem. He's going to hold them back from winning this game, and if Carson Beck was out there, you're probably going to be looking at the score saying, wow, Georgia played a really good game, they would have won it. That's not what happened in this game. It was not because of the quarterback change. It was not because of many things offensively other than the run game. It was a lot because of Notre Dame's situational football. And a lot of it has to do with that guy right there. He outcoached Kirby Smart from start to finish in this game. That is the first time I've been able to say that confidently without Nick Saban being on the other sideline. He did a remarkable job in this game. Notre Dame dominated the special teams part of this game, got the kick return for a touchdown. Mitch Jeter finally hit a couple of field goals in a row. Remarkable kicker that just had a little bit of a tough stretch when he was injured midway through the season. He seems to have found himself once again. And then that incredible, hockey change. They had 11 go off, 11 come on. That is something we will talk about next week in a little bit more detail because Kirby Smart said at the end of the game, he was told by SEC officials that is not allowed. Another issue with officiating in this sport, and definitely something that we'll have to talk about in a little bit more detail. If the SEC officials think one thing and the Big 12 officials think something different, we have a big-time problem, especially if it's that black and white. But more than anything, what we have to talk about in this game is this defense. They absolutely flew around the field. They were really remarkable in this game, and when you had UGA had a number of different chances to get into the end zone to make a couple of plays. They had the fumble. They had a couple of turnovers on downs. They did not get much consistency going other than Gunnar Stockton making a huge play with his arm. That was really the only time that you felt like Georgia could really get some offense going was when they hit that big shot to Arian Smith, and then Parker Jones got in the way, which ESPN, chill out. That was not the reason that they lost this game. They cut to him just way too many times in the fourth quarter. But again, beside the point, remarkable play from this defense that has really been remarkable all year. The pass rush with Junior Tui Alamaka was just incredible. Had a sack, had a forced fumble, multiple tackles for loss. This front seven without Riley Mills, still absolutely terrifying in every sense of the word. So, remarkable game from them. And then apologies for this. Had a couple of mistakes there. But overall, we want to talk about Riley Leonard's legs here for a second. Remarkable play from him. He was absolutely incredible throughout this game. 80 yards on 14 carries, only had 90 yards passing. So was not all that effective throwing the ball through the air. Had a couple of plays, but overall, they played incredible football on the ground. And 57 seconds was the difference in this game. With about 54 or so seconds, 45, something like that, seconds left in the first quarter, it was 6-3. And Georgia was getting the ball back. You're thinking, okay, they'll kneel it, go to halftime. That'll be that. Then they get the forced fumble. Then they get the immediate touchdown. Then they get the opening kick and return it for a touchdown in the second half. And that was about all you needed. All you needed was about 17 points in this game. They got 17 points in a matter of 50 seconds, and that was all she wrote for this Georgia team. But Georgia came up just short in this one, and it wasn't because of Carson Beck. It was a lot because of that coaching room. It was a lot because of the deficiencies that we've seen really all year. They had a couple of drops in that wide receiver room that really hurt them throughout this one, including one by Dylan Bell that one led to a touchdown. There was another one later that was a very tough drop that could have led to a first down. A couple of different things, a lot of different issues that happened in this game, and they were the issues that Georgia has faced all year. The offensive line not being quite as forceful as they needed to be, the run game being very inconsistent, and then that wide receiver room just not necessarily holding onto the ball the way they should. Now, the one thing that I will say about this team going forward, I think you have your quarterback. I think the one thing you really wanted to figure out in this game is, do we have the quarterback going forward, or do we need to continue to go into the portal? I don't think you have to go into the portal. I think Gunnar Stockton is going to be your guy in 2025. Remarkable player and played some really good football in some really tough moments in this game. So overall, I don't think that's a question going out of this game. It'll be interesting to see what Georgia does in the transfer portal. They were going after Fernando Mendoza. They're going after a couple other guys. But the reality is, the way that number 14 played in this game, I think you got to give him the keys. He was really remarkable and definitely made a ton of plays that you have to love. And this team played really, really hard around him. Just a couple of mistakes here and there were the difference in this one, especially that 11 on, 11 off type play that draw UGA offsides and really pretty much finished this game for them. But remarkable coaching from Marcus Freeman throughout this one. He definitely won that battle. There's no doubt about that. And now they move forward to Penn State. And a lot of different things loom large in that game. Obviously, the run defense is very, very solid. Obviously, you bring a little bit more to the table than a couple other teams do, and you're going to need Jeremiah Love and Howard Cross fully healthy for that game. But this is a title good team. When you're a coach at that level, when you can run the football and play defense at that level, we've seen what happens with Michigan. It's the exact same thing that could happen with this Notre Dame team. Remarkable game from them. They move on to Miami and a chance for a spot in the national title for the first time since 2012 for this Notre Dame team. And then Georgia, a lot of changes will come to this team. I feel pretty confident in that. I don't think quarterback will be one of them. I think Gunnar Stockton proved that he is the guy going forward. Georgia's not going anywhere. I don't think I have to tell anyone that. When Kirby Smart is there, they are going to win a lot of football games. They are going to be a force to be dealt with in the SEC. Obviously, this was not a vintage Georgia team, and frankly, I kind of thought it was going to be going into the year. I thought they were going to be different, but I thought they were going to be just as talented, just as terrifying to deal with. They obviously were very inconsistent throughout this year. Lost a couple of games that they probably shouldn't have lost. Definitely played close in a couple of games that they shouldn't have played close in. A lot of issues with this Georgia team going forward. If that wide receiver room is fixed, if Gunnar Stockton can play with a lot of confidence going forward, and Paul, that is an argument to be made. You know, how much does Gunnar Stockton fit into what they want to do? Do they go back to a little bit of that Stetson Bennett kind of game plan, or do they stick forward with that pro-style way they've been going about it with Carson Beck? There's a lot of questions with Gunnar Stockton, so maybe they will continue to go into the portal. Maybe they do feel more confident in someone coming in than Gunnar Stockton sticking around, but from what I saw, I'd roll with that kid going forward. I'd definitely lean into him because I think he played remarkably well in a really remarkably tough spot, especially with the way that run game played. So, remarkable game from him, remarkable game from Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman, and they move on forward. They're going to play Penn State, and it's going to be a really, really fun matchup down there in Miami. Two teams that are relatively similar in some ways. Feel like we might have a rock fight there, and let's talk about it. Right after this break, I want to get into a little bit of an early look at those two games. So, we'll jump into Notre Dame, Penn State first, and then we'll get to Ohio State, Texas. Might have some scheduling changes that we'll discuss a little bit later, but overall, two incredible games, and we'll get a little bit of an early look at them right after this.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about all of the quarterfinal games. Definitely some really remarkable ones, especially that one down there in Atlanta. Texas absolutely escapes, and Notre Dame and Penn State move on to the next round, and that's what we got to talk about. Little early look at those CFP semifinals. We'll just go kind of 50,000 feet. Look at this thing for a second. The 5 through 8 seeds have made it to the Final Four, and we can talk about the formatting when we go forward to Monday. Definitely we'll talk about some of the changes that probably do have to come to this. You know, get rid of auto buys, probably get rid of buys altogether. I tend to believe we're going to find our way to 16 teams here pretty soon. I tend to believe that it's been pushed a little bit into hyperspeed by these results this past weekend. So definitely something to watch. Feels like 16 is where we're heading. We'll obviously break that down in a little bit more detail, but these two games are going to be incredible to watch. There's no doubt about that. These are four teams that have played really good football at different times this year. One team that is far and away the best team as far as I'm concerned right now, but frankly, they've been a little bit up and down as well. So who knows what happens with that one, but let's go ahead and jump in here, and we'll start with what should be the first game. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail next week, but it has been brought up, the possibility of moving this game to the next day, moving the Cotton Bowl up. I'd be a little bit surprised if they move the Cotton Bowl. I wouldn't be as surprised if they move the Orange Bowl a little bit back, but frankly, I probably think they're going to stick. I don't necessarily think either of these teams is overly upset about having 7 days to prepare compared to 9 days. Now, we'll see what happens. It definitely could be they want to push it back a day just to make things a little bit easier. We'll talk about that in time. I can promise you that. But two teams that have played really, really good football over the last little bit, and more than anything else, it really does start with these quarterbacks. Riley Leonard and Drew Aller are playing the best football that I've seen them play. Riley Leonard is throwing the ball with a ton of confidence right now. Drew Aller is running this offense with a ton of confidence. Both these quarterbacks are elevating their game at the very right moment, and the run game is a big part of that, whether you talk about Drew Aller or Riley Leonard. Obviously, Drew Aller is not a huge part of the running game with his legs, but that ability to push the ball downfield opens a ton of different doors on that front seven that they can really take advantage of. So, remarkable stuff from both these quarterbacks over the first two games. This is going to be a bigger challenge. Now, Notre Dame might have just had the biggest challenge that they're going to face, at least in terms of defenses, but remarkable teams. I don't know when the last time they faced off against each other, Anthony. I'll break that down. I'll find that out and do it in my full preview for that game, but it's definitely one I haven't thought about yet. It's definitely one that I have not seen, I don't think, in a very, very long time. So it will be very fun to see these two teams on the field. Frankly, the helmets in the semifinals are just about as beautiful as you could possibly ask for. But obviously something we can get into in time. Really remarkable stuff from both these quarterbacks, and they are leading these offenses about as well as I've seen them led in the last couple of years. Really remarkable players, and they're elevating at the right time. Then we got to talk about the coaches, because we just talked about how good Marcus Freeman was in that game against Georgia. We've talked a number of times about how not so great James Franklin can be in some of these big-time games. Some people have said the SMU and Boise State games weren't big games because they weren't great teams on the other side. They were big games. They were CFP games. I understand they were a little bit easier than some of the other games that were played this past week, but the reality is remarkable stuff from James Franklin the first couple of games. Now you got to kick it up a notch. You're going to have to be a little bit better, a little bit crisper, a little bit more proactive in some of your play calls. You're going to have to be just better pretty much across the board to deal with this defense. Remarkable team on the other side, and he's going to have to be ready to go toe-to-toe with Marcus Freeman when it comes to coaching. And then you talk about these defenses. These are just absolute beasts on either side of the field. Abdul Carter did go down in that Boise State game. Posted a little something on Twitter and Instagram. Makes me feel pretty confident that he will be playing in this game this next week. You need him. Frankly, I think he might have been on track for a pressure every single snap in that Boise State game. He was dominating that offensive line before he went down. Remarkable player. And then you talk about that Notre Dame back end. It's absolutely ridiculous, led by Xavier Watts, but Christian Gray has played really, really good football throughout the last little bit. Ryan Clark's son, Christian Clark, has played really, really good football throughout the last little bit. So remarkable team on the other side. And Drew Aller is going to have to throw into some tighter windows that are going to be much, much harder to get out of the teams. What is your favorite complete uniform? I think I got to go with Ohio State. It's one of my favorites in the entire country. I think the helmet is maybe my favorite in the entire country, especially with those Buckeye stickers. So I'll go with Ohio State. Obviously, we'll see what they pull out in the playoff. That Penn State jersey is really good, and I know Texas is the home team for that game, so maybe they'll wear their burnt orange, but remarkable jerseys across the board. I'll lean towards Ohio State in this one, but definitely a really tough battle, no doubt about that. But both these defenses are absolutely ridiculous. Tuialamaka and company is going to try to make life miserable for an offensive line for Penn State that has been really, really good, no doubt about that, but probably hasn't faced quite anything like this. Now, Ohio State probably pretty close, and we'll look into that, see how much we can kind of take from that matchup and the Oregon matchup, but remarkable team, remarkable offensive line. And then Abdul Carter is going to get after that offensive line for Notre Dame. Really good group, a little bit young, and this is probably going to be almost definitely going to be the best edge rusher that they've played all year, so it's going to be a tough one for them, no doubt about that. This feels like one that has a few possessions, that it feels like one that comes down to the margins, much like that Notre Dame UGA game last night. It's going to be awesome. There's no doubt about that. This is two really, really awesome games, two teams that are led by their defense, led by their run games, and it's going to be awesome to watch. They've suffered some tough losses throughout this year, particularly Notre Dame with that NIU loss, but the reality is you get these two teams on the field, you're going to see some special stuff, especially from those running back rooms. You got to have Jeremiah Love healthy for this game. There's no doubt about that. You have to make sure that that guy is ready to roll for this game, and then you got Jadarian Price, then you got Riley Leonard, Jordan Faison's making a number of plays on that offensive side of the ball. So these are two teams that feel like they're hitting their stride at the very right moment. It feels like we're going to have a little bit of a defensive battle, but cannot wait to get into that game, and we'll definitely break it down in more detail when we get into next week. But then we got to get into this one. This one opened at a Ohio State minus, I think, 2.5, 1.5. It ballooned to 6 very, very quickly. A lot of people are putting money on Ohio State right now. I cannot blame them. Frankly, if Will Howard is playing that level of football, I don't know who can stop him, if I'm being totally honest. Now, the one thing I am fairly confident about as we get into this game is this pass rush for Texas is going to be the best one that Ohio State has faced all year. This group on the edge is absolutely ridiculous. You have Trey Moore, you have Barron Sorrell, you have Colin Simmons, who is becoming one of the best edge rushers in the entire country throughout this year. So this is going to be the best pass rush that they've faced. Now, might not be the best outright D-line. I bet it's pretty close. They're very, very good defensive linemen all across this group for Texas, and I think it's going to be the stiffest challenge that this O-line has had to face for Ohio State, definitely in the last couple of games, and they played some good groups. They've played some really, really talented groups. This edge rushing group is about as good as they're going to face the rest of the year. But then you move forward to the quarterback battle, and a lot of different things to unpack here. Will Howard playing the best football that I've seen him play. He's playing absolutely ridiculous right now, ripping the ball all over the field, playing with a lot of confidence, and just doing incredible, incredible things. Now, on the other side, Quinn Ewers has been a little bit more up and down, but you look at these last two games against Clemson and against Arizona State. He was really good. He made the one mistake against Arizona State. He had the drop that led to the pick against Clemson. Other than that, the kid has been very, very crisp. He's been taking care of the ball and making some really, really good plays in this one. I think both these players are playing really elite football, and they're going to go up against probably the two best defenses in the country, in Texas and Ohio State. It's going to be absolutely remarkable to watch what happens in this game, and it could be an absolute shootout, in my opinion. It could be a 10-13 game. It could go anywhere in between. It's going to be absolutely incredible to watch this one unfold, and the biggest thing to talk about when you get into this game is sort of that quarterback battle, but also the rushing attack for both these teams. You know, Ohio State's starting to find it a little bit more. Will Howard, still not a huge part of that rushing offense, but the offensive line has found it. Those running backs are as elite as it comes. For Texas, they have some issues there. Trey Wisner and Jaden Blue just have to get going in this game if they're not going to want to put everything on Quinn Ewers in. If he's throwing into really, really tight openings against that back end, he's going to make mistakes. There's no doubt about that. So you badly need a run game in this one. So the offensive line for Texas really has struggled against elite defensive lines throughout this year. They got to figure that out over the next couple of days, because if they don't, Ohio State's going to eat them alive the same way Georgia did, and it's going to look pretty similar to the way those Georgia games did. So overall, it's going to be an awesome game. There's no doubt about that. The biggest thing that stands out, I think, to all of us really is the playmakers in this game all over the field. It's absolutely ridiculous what these two teams have. You have two of the best players in college, the CFP thus far, in Jeremiah Smith as well as Matthew Golden on one side. Two pass rushing attacks that are absolutely insanely talented with Jack Sawyer, JTT, Colin Simmons on one side. You have Trey Moore, you have Barron Sorrell. It's going to be ridiculous. The amount of talent, the amount of ability on that field at the same time. It's just going to come down to execution. Which one of these teams can keep their head on right? Can Ohio State keep that pedal to the metal mentality and just tear Texas to pieces? Can Texas right the ship just a little bit in the run game, keep Quinn Ewers playing elite football, and then really take over this game? I think it's one of those that a lot of people are going to be picking Ohio State. Just about everyone is going to be picking Ohio State in this one, but Texas is a team that if everything clicks at the right time, they're incredibly hard to stop as well. So it's going to be awesome. I think it could fit any mold. I think it could be a shootout, a rock fight. Pick which one you want. But I know we have two quarterbacks playing elite football. We have two of the best wide receiver groups in the country. We have two of the best defenses in the country, and two head coaches that are looking for national title number one. All of these coaches are looking for national title number one, which is a special storyline that we'll talk about next week in a little bit more detail. But one of the things Anthony did bring up here about the Notre Dame Penn State game is Notre Dame has tended to be a little bit one-dimensional. Now they found a little bit more pass game in the last couple of games, but it is something that they're going to have to think about. Now, it is definitely something that Penn State's going to have to deal with much more of than they did against Boise State, because you pretty much knew it was going to be number 2. If someone was getting the ball, now you got to deal with 3 different guys. So that is something kind of to talk about, and we'll break it down. Definitely in more detail, break down what I think Notre Dame could do to kind of combat that issue, and what Penn State will definitely do to combat that run game for Notre Dame. But 2 awesome games. There's no doubt about that. You have Ohio State against Texas that feels like we know which way it's going to go, but whenever you feel like you know which way the season's going to go, it goes the opposite direction. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then Penn State, Notre Dame, 2 teams that have been a little bit deprived over the last little bit, just trying to get back to the mountaintop. It's going to be awesome to watch that one unfold, but let's take our third break here, and when we come back, let's talk about bowl season. There's been a lot of really incredible games since last time we talked. Alabama falls, South Carolina falls, the SEC falls in a lot of different ways, and we'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just took a quick look at those semifinal games that are going to come up next week. We'll obviously get into a little bit more detail next week, break down some of the big time talking points. I'll give my official picks for those games next week as well. But let's talk about bowl season, because a lot of stuff has happened since the last time we talked. We have a number of games to break down, and then we have the last 3 this upcoming weekend, the next couple of days, so we'll break those down as well. But let's start this thing off, and let's start it off with probably the biggest one of the last couple of days. Alabama does fall to Michigan for the second time in a calendar year. They fell on the first day of the year, they fell on the last day of the year to Michigan, and it was a really, really tough year in between. Frankly, a lot of different things happening around Alabama, and we'll get into a little bit more detail around Kalen DeBoer in the future around there, probably next week, maybe a little bit after that. We'll obviously figure that out in time, but overall, pretty embarrassing from Alabama. They started this game with a turnover on downs, a fumble, an INT, a fumble, and 2 punts. That is terrible. Beyond terrible. They totaled -3 yards during that time. It was very ugly. It was rainy to start this game, but really no excuse for that. Jalen Milroe played really, really bad football. This defensive line for Michigan dominated the Alabama offensive line, and Sharon Moore and this Michigan staff, this Michigan team, deserve all the respect in the world. No Kenneth Grant, no Mason Graham, no Edwards, no Mullings, no Will Johnson, no Colston Loveland, and they somehow got it done. They played incredible defense. They took advantage of the openings when Alabama gave them to them, and they played really, really good football. And frankly, it's probably about as low as you're going to see this Michigan program for quite some time. They've played incredibly, incredibly good football throughout the backstretch of this season, and I think they're a team that with Bryce Underwood at quarterback, it's obviously a little bit of a question mark, but the talent will be very much there, and Sharon Moore seems to have these guys pulling in the right direction. So going to be awesome to see what they can do over the next little bit. Kalen DeBoer, a lot of questions after year one. There's no doubt about that. They've missed the double-digit wins for the 16th or 17th year in a row is what it would have been. They missed the mark just by a little bit. Go 9-4, and I think there's going to be a lot of questions. I'll do a full segment on this. I don't think it's time to fully panic on Kalen DeBoer. I still think he's an elite head coach. I still think he can have a ton of success around there, but definitely some questions that have popped up throughout this year that Alabama fans were not hoping to answer. And then we had this one. South Carolina falls to Illinois, and a little bit of a coaching interaction, altercation, whatever you want to call it, during this game between Brett Bielema as well as Shane Beamer. I think it was kind of fun. I got to be totally honest with you. As long as no one got hurt, as long as there was no physical contact, I think it was more than fine. It was definitely one of those things that gave this game just a little bit more juice. I don't know what the actual argument was about. Feels like it was about some type of substitution thing. There were a lot of battles happening in this game, but overall, really remarkable game, no doubt about that. And another team that yelled from the rooftops that they belonged in the field that falls short once again. And it's not to say that these bowl games are the end-all, be-all of the season, but it is to say, if you're going to yell that loudly, you better go win that bowl game. But overall, remarkable stuff from Illinois. They get their 10th win for the first time in a very long time, I think since 2001, if I'm not mistaken. So remarkable stuff from Brett Bielema this season. Remarkable stuff from Luke Altmaier, who's going to come back for 2025. And this running back room with LJ McCray, with McLaughlin are very, very talented, or Mallory, excuse me, very talented players, and definitely a team that continues to head in the right direction. There were incredible stuff from Aaron Henry in this game, the defensive coordinator for Illinois, that really held this offense that looked essentially impossible to stop under wraps for much of the day. Really remarkable stuff from this Illinois coaching staff, and they continue to build forward. South Carolina, I still continue to think, is going to be a really big player in the SEC next year. I think Lenore Sellers is going to be a special player in the SEC next year. Louisville, Washington. This was an awesome game and had one of the better performances that we've seen in all of bowl season thus far. But let's start with Harrison Bailey. He comes into this game after Tyler Shuck moves on to the NFL draft and plays some really good football. 16 for 25, 164 yards, 3 scores in this one. Weirdly enough, he wasn't the best quarterback on the field. Damon Williams went for 5 scores, over 400 yards in this game, made a Johnny Manziel-esque play, as some people described it on Twitter. So remarkable play from this kid, and definitely a guy that I really loved going into the season. I thought he was going to take over at some point. He did later in the season, and he's shown that he's going to be a really special player. Can make a ton of plays with his legs and is a little bit more capable of a passer than even I realized. So going to be really fun to watch what this guy can do in 2025, and both these teams really fell a little bit short of expectations in 2024. I mean, you had Louisville coming off that ACC title run, obviously missed the mark just by a little bit this year. Washington, team coming off a national title run, obviously fell a little bit short this year. A lot of different changes around both these teams, but I think they'll both be back in the mix next year. Miller Moss with that running back room around Louisville is going to be special. Washington with Damon Williams and guys like Jonte Cook coming in, I think it's going to be a really, really fun duo to watch next year. And Louisville's a team, especially with the way the ACC has finished off this year, definitely someone to watch in the ACC going into 2025. LSU was able to finish off a very weird, frustrating season with a very nice ending here. They were able to handle business in this one. Garrett Nussmeier is downright incredible. He had over 300 yards, 3 scores, did have that one mistake on the pick, but this kid is going to be one of the best quarterbacks going into 2025. He might just be the number 1 overall pick when you go into that 2026 draft. So we will talk about that in time. Obviously, plenty of time to get into all of that, and a very good quarterback class is what we're staring down in 2026. But overall, this LSU team is one that I really like going into 2025, and I like them pretty much every year, so I'm going to try to temper my expectations just a little bit, but I think that wide receiver room will be just about as good as it was this past year, next year, and I think Garrett Nussmeier could end up being one of the best quarterbacks in the country in 2025. And then on the other side, I think Baylor's a team to watch in 2025. You have Sawyer Robertson coming back for another year, Dave Aranda really sinking his teeth into that defense and getting them going in the right direction. It was a tough challenge for that game, but overall, I think it's a program that's heading in the right direction and could very well compete for a Big 12 title that looks just about as open as it is this year in 2025. And then we had this one. The SEC saved a little bit of face in this game with Ole Miss just absolutely rolling over Duke. Jackson Dart was remarkable in this one. Ended with over 400 yards, 4 scores. Threw a deep pass late in that game that probably didn't need to be thrown, but at the end of the day, understand you want to finish on the right note. He played an incredible game and probably helped his draft stock just a little bit in this one. Not really sure where he'll end up. We'll do a little bit bigger of an NFL draft breakdown when we get into that time of year, but overall, very talented player, can make a ton of plays with his legs and arm. Very talented guy, and definitely a season that went the wrong way for Ole Miss. There's no doubt about that. You take one loss away from this team, they're in the playoff. They might still be playing in the playoff. They're a very, very talented team. Played a lot of really good football this year, but when they really needed it, they couldn't get it done. In a couple of games that they absolutely should have got it done, they couldn't. So they fall a little bit short. They move forward to 2025, and they got to replace a ton of talent. The same way they did this year, they got to replace a ton of talent. I do think Austin Simmons is going to be their quarterback going into 2025, so no worry there. Going to need a lot of help pretty much everywhere else. And then for Duke, you got a new quarterback coming in Darian Mensah. People know what that dollar sign is. People know what that figure is, and he's going to have to play up to that number. There's no doubt about that. So a lot of pressure on Manny Diaz heading into 2025. A lot of great things to like about this program, however. And then we got games going on today and tomorrow that will close out the bowl season. It's been a remarkable bowl season, but North Texas and Texas State will get us started today at 4 p.m., Two teams that I've really enjoyed this year. What G.J. Kinney has done over there in San Marcos for Texas State has been downright awesome to watch, and he's going to stick around there at least for one more year. North Texas, one of the most electric offenses in the country. The issue is no Chandler Morris in this game, one of the leading passers throughout the country. He is transferred to Virginia. He has set up shop there, so definitely something that will really hurt North Texas in this game. he's kind of a mean green offense. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Texas State in this one. I think they roll in this one. I think Jordan McLeod finishes the season on a very high note, and this team heads into 2025 as one of the teams to watch, not only for that Sun Belt title, but possibly for that G5 CFP spot. Minnesota, Virginia Tech, two teams that I think could be very real in 2025. Max Brosmer, I think, is out the door at Minnesota. I don't know. All the eligibility rules are going over my head at this point. So obviously something we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. Virginia Tech missed the mark a little bit, but has plenty going for it in 2025. It's going to be a very interesting game. No doubt about that. A fair amount of opt-outs in this game. Kyron Drones won't play with an injury, not with an opt-out, but it'll be a little bit of a weird one. It'll be a little bit all over the place. I think Minnesota has enough here. I think they'll get Darius Taylor going. I think that run game will be a little bit too much, and I think Virginia Tech, with a lot of the guys that have left through the portal and have opted out in other directions, I think they're going to have a tough time here. It's one of those teams that has an offseason that is absolutely huge in front of them. If they don't hit all the right buttons, it could be a really tough 25. If they hit the right buttons, I think they could have a really, really incredible 2025 and an ACC that looks absolutely wide open. But this will be a really fun game. I'll lean Minnesota for the time being, and we'll wait for that Mayo bath sometime tonight. And then Buffalo Liberty, Buffalo has been one of the surprises of the year to me with Pete Lembo. He's done an incredible job up there in Buffalo. And then Liberty, you missed the mark just a little bit. A team that had definitely struggled with a number of different things throughout this year, had a number of comeback wins, so played really good football at different times, but Caden Salter wasn't quite the playmaker that he was a year ago. It showed with Liberty's record this year. But two teams that have played some really good football. I think the biggest thing here is CJ Ogbonnaya, and that offense for Buffalo is really hitting their stride. Has scored over 40 points in the last couple of games. I think it's going to be too much for Liberty. I think especially with Caden Salter all the way over there in Boulder playing for Colorado at this point, I think it's going to be a little bit too much for Liberty. I think Buffalo gets this win. I think they get it relatively comfortably, and I think CJ Ogbonnaya puts a lot of people on notice in this game. That will be the last bowl game of the season, but it was an awesome bowl season. I mean, when you talk about the bowl season, everyone has a million things to say. How they're very meaningless games, how the players shouldn't care about them, how the coaches shouldn't care about them, how it's better to just go into the portal than to play these games. Don't let people tell you these games don't matter. I watch these guys leave everything out there on the field for just about every game that I watched in the bowl season. I've watched coaches go at it during these games. It's going to be awesome. It's been an incredible elite bowl season, and hopefully we can get this thing back on track. Hopefully we can get bowl season getting the respect that it absolutely deserves, but we're definitely heading in the right direction. It was an awesome bowl season. I hope a lot of people really tuned into this one because it was incredible to watch, and I'm sure we'll hopefully at least, will carry over into 2025, and we'll have incredible bowl games going forward in this 12-team playoff. Obviously, a lot of people are worried about that. This season made me feel a lot more confident about that type of stuff, and yeah, I fully understand Caden Salter's decision. And frankly, I thought it was going to come last year. He jumped into the portal, jumped out, so I was a little bit surprised that he was at Liberty this year. But I think it's one of those players that can make a huge difference for Colorado. And then when you talk about Miami and Jaden Maiava, that is a player that has been bounced around a lot. I've heard a lot of different rumors about him. He is still at USC, so I'm not going to speculate too much on that one, but I've heard some different things around Jaden Maiava. Definitely a guy that a lot of people want, and we'll see what happens there. I still think there's a couple of twists and turns in the transfer portal, and we'll talk about that right after this, actually. We'll get into the transfer portal news, some NFL draft news, some coaching carousel news. We'll talk about all of it right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the bowl games that are coming up today, the ones that have already finished, and that'll do it for bowl season. We'll break down the games that are happening in the next couple of days, obviously on Monday, but overall, that'll do it for bowl season. Now it's just the semifinals and the final of the CFP. Going to be really awesome to watch that unfold, but let's do a little bit of a weekend wrap-up. Let's do some portal news, some draft news, some coaching news, just kind of go around the horn and make sure you guys have all the stuff you need to know as you head into this weekend, and we'll start with a little bit of transfer portal news. We'll start with Tony Grimes. It sounds like Tony Grimes is going to follow his former head coach Barry Odom over to West Lafayette, play for Purdue next season. Very talented player, was a 5-star coming out of high school, played at UNC, played at A&M, played at UNLV, definitely played his best football at UNLV. Very talented, very rangy cornerback is going to need to be a huge player for Purdue. I can almost promise you that. He's going to have to be almost an immediate starter, and he could very well be a draft pick in 2026 if he can really put together a great year in the Big Ten. And then you got Tyler, Onyedim, I apologize for the pronunciation, but former Iowa State defensive tackle is on his way to College Station. This is a huge pickup for A&M, definitely a very experienced, smart player, 90 tackles, 11 tackles for loss in his college career. Definitely a great depth piece for this A&M team and could develop into a darn good player throughout the season. Very, very talented guy and one guy that I feel like is just scratching the surface and what he can do in college football. Then we had a couple of guys jump in the last little bit. We'll go over some wide receivers here really quick. Noah Thomas has jumped into the portal. Texas A&M has picked up 3 different guys that I think are going to be huge players for that team, so makes some sense here. But it sounds like Texas, UGA, and Miami are the teams you're going to want to watch, especially those first 2. Texas and UGA are really kind of standing out in this one, and I think Texas and UGA definitely need this type of player. Texas really benefited from having someone like A.D. Mitchell. Georgia really benefited from having someone like A.D. Mitchell. So overall, I think both those teams need that 50-50 guy that can go downfield and make a big-time play. I think this might just be the guy. So whoever wins out on that one, I think they're getting an immediate starter, and frankly, a guy that I think had just barely been unlocked at A&M. Zachariah Branch, he is still out there. The sweepstakes are still very much alive when it looked like it was going to be Georgia for quite some time. Now he is making his way down to Miami, so it's going to be interesting to see if they can win that one out. They got to be able to pitch a quarterback. So I have to assume something is happening behind the scenes, like we talked about Anthony with that quarterback position, and we'll see if it's his quarterback. See if it's Jade Mayava coming over from USC that kind of entices him there. But overall, Tennessee, UGA, Texas still very much in this one. I think this one might be a little bit more drug out than a couple of these other ones. And then Squirrel White, he is off to Florida State right now, and this would be huge. It's a very, very talented kid when he is healthy. Florida State has their quarterback for next year in Thomas Castellanos, so the pitch will be a little bit smoother than it might be for someone like Miami, but overall, very, very talented kid, a guy that if he's on the field, if he is healthy, he can make all the plays in the world. Now, that's been a little bit of a worry throughout this last year, so definitely something that we'll have to watch throughout the offseason. If he does go down, then it's going to be a little bit of a tough time for that Florida State wide receiver room, but this is a guy that absolutely can elevate to that wide receiver 1 position as long as he is healthy, as long as he gets comfortable in this offense, and as long as that offense takes a number of steps forward in a number of different places. And then Takario Davis. We talked about this one a little bit last week and said he's pretty much NFL bound. It feels pretty confident that he's going in that direction. Sounds more confident that he's coming back to college football now. So a lot of different teams in this conversation: Washington, Miami, Michigan, Ole Miss, Texas. I tend to lean that Washington and Texas would be the 2 to watch because his former head coach, obviously Jed Fish, is at Washington. His former defensive coordinator is at Texas as the linebacker coach. So a couple of different things to watch there. Definitely something that we'll unpack in time, and this might be one of the best players in the entire portal right now. Definitely a guy that probably could have gone in the draft and got drafted. Obviously didn't love his position as much as he would have liked to, and he's going to come back for one more year. Definitely will be a starter for just about wherever he ends up. Moving forward to the NFL draft, some players have started to make their decisions, and some people have some pretty aggressive takes on these decisions, including guys that cover the draft. So we'll start with Carson Beck. Todd McShay said this was foolish. I disagree. I got to be totally honest with you. This makes so much sense to me because you look at this quarterback class, not very strong. That's just the reality of the situation. There's those 2 guys up top. The one thing that those 2 guys do not do overly well, at least from an NFL perspective, is processing speed. They kind of roll through their reads a little bit slower than maybe someone like Carson Beck does. If he heals before the combine, I think he can go much higher than a lot of people are saying he can go in this draft. He's a very talented player. Definitely had that tough stretch in the middle of the season, but finished with 11 touchdowns and 0 picks in the last 4 games. Very talented player, and obviously a guy that can process the field very quickly, get the ball out of his hands. I think he's going to be drafted a lot higher than people are going to think, and frankly, I think he still has a very talented NFL career ahead of him. Jalen Milroe, another up and down quarterback that a lot of people have questioned him going into the draft. Another one that makes total sense to me. He doesn't have a great shot to come back next year and get above guys like Garrett Nussmeier, guys like Drew Aller, guys like maybe Arch Manning and Nico Iamaleava. He was not going to be in a better position in 2026 than he is right now. So I fully understand this one. This is probably his best shot to get into the NFL, to have a position in the NFL, and he's one of those guys I just don't know. It's kind of like an Anthony Richardson situation where I just worry about the ability to put the ball on target the way that he needs to. That being said, the physical ability is undeniable. He's absolutely someone that you put him in the right position, you put the right players around him, he can still have success. I'd be a little bit more surprised if he was a long-term quarterback than Carson Beck was, if Carson Beck was, but at the end of the day, very talented kid, and we'll see where he ends up going on draft day. Other Bama guys have jumped in over the last couple of days. Jahad Campbell, Tyler Booker, two that I fully expected to, that I think are going to be long-time starters on Sundays. Jahad Campbell's remarkable at that linebacker position. Tyler Booker can just move mountains at that guard position. So I think both these guys will be around for quite some time. I think you'll see them for decades probably for a decade. Let's not get too crazy here, but two remarkable players. Cannot wait to see where they go. Could very well both be first-round picks when it comes around to April. And then I just wanted to touch on Harold Fannin really quickly. This is a guy that I cannot wait to see. He's an elite pass catcher in every sense of the word. I'm not sure how high he'll go. I don't know how high any of these tight ends will go, but the reality is this is one of the most talented tight ends that I've seen in quite some time. He will be a long-time tight end in the NFL. Too good of a pass catcher, too good of a route runner, and absolutely someone that maybe won't put his hand in the ground too often, but frankly, you look around the NFL, there's plenty of tight ends that don't. So I think he's going to be a really talented player. I cannot wait to see what he can do at the next level. But there will be more guys jumping in every day. We'll get a little bit better of a breakdown after the national title. We'll see what Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame players jump in, and we'll obviously have some Georgia players continue to jump in, and some different things happen over the next little bit. It's going to be an awesome cycle. It's one that might not be quite as strong across the board as a couple of others in the past couple of years, but it is loaded at that running back position. And that's going to be a really, really fun one to talk about, and we'll have plenty of time to break that down over the next little bit. But some coaching carousel news that I wanted to get to before we get out of here is Miami. They do have a defensive coordinator position open. That is not a surprise to just about anyone that's been paying attention. Lance Goodry has been let go by Miami. Totally expected, much like the LSU situation last year. You looked at the season that you had. You said, we had Cam Ward, we had Jaden Daniels, and we found a way to lose games. You can't have that happen. The defensive coordinator just has to be a little bit better. These defenders just have to be a little bit better, and they're slowly doing that. Now, a couple of guys to watch as you move forward in this search. Tyler Santucci seems to be the guy you're really going to want to watch in this one. He has been kind of the leader in the clubhouse right now. Did an incredible job at Georgia Tech this year, including in that Miami game. Held them to 23 points. Played incredible football throughout this year with some guys that are definitely not as talented as the guys they have over there in Miami. Another name to watch is Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator at Tennessee. I think that might be a little bit harder of a sell than the defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech, but we'll see what happens there. Would be a fantastic hire if they were able to pull him away from Knoxville. And then Jason Taylor is the other guy you're going to want to watch. He's the Miami defensive line coach. Very, very talented guy. Obviously has had a very long playing career, has had a very long coaching career at this point. Cannot wait to see what they do here. I think Tyler Santucci is probably the favorite here. I think he's coached incredible football at Georgia Tech. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Sounds like some other teams might be in for him, and we'll talk about that in time. Some moves haven't been made that he's been actually talked about, so we'll get into that, I promise you. But it'll be incredible to watch that one unfold, and one of the biggest hires that you'll see this entire offseason. And then Zach Alley. He was hired at West Virginia over the last little bit, and huge hire for Rich Rodriguez, a huge loss for Oklahoma and Brent Venables. He is a rising star in this industry. He's absolutely a guy that I fully expect to be a head coach in a couple of years. I don't think he'll be around Morgantown for too long. It'll be for the good reason, though. It won't be because he really, really struggled. It'll be because I think these defenses are going to really improve under him. I think that 2025 cycle or that 2026 cycle, whatever have you, he's going to be a big factor in it. He's a fantastic head coach and fantastic defensive coordinator, and I tend to believe he will be a fantastic head coach in plenty of time. But remarkable stuff from all of these guys, and definitely going to be a really interesting end of this coaching carousel cycle. But before we get out here, I did want to make sure I took some time to appreciate Tiger Beck. He is the brother of Jake Beck, a very talented TCU wide receiver. He did pass away as a result from the attacks in New Orleans. Was a very talented wide receiver and kick returner, was all Ivy League in kick returning when he was at Princeton. Obviously an unfair way for him to go. Very young kid, I believe 28 years old. Deserved a lot better than this. I can almost promise you that, but wanted to make sure I sent my condolences to the Beck family. I mean, Jack has been absolutely incredible to watch this year, and obviously a terrible time for that family. Hoping they can find some type of peace during this time, and hopefully, something can happen. I don't know what more there is to say, but just wanted to send my condolences out to them. Just wanted to remind everyone that college football, as important as it seems to all of us and as important as it is to all of us in certain different times, not quite the most important thing, not remotely the most important thing. Remember to cherish the people that you have, and definitely make sure that you hug all the people that you have around you, because this is a very unfortunate loss way too soon in his life. Definitely deserved a lot better than this, but one of those things. Wanted to make sure I sent out my condolences before we get out here, and we'll move forward. We'll move forward to those CFP semifinals next week. We'll move forward to a lot of different things happening over the next little bit, and we got 2 awesome games on deck. Cannot wait to get into those with you guys. Cannot wait to break all those down, and we will do that in plenty of time. On Monday, we'll break down some of the issues with the CFP, a lot of different stuff. The SEC falling, a million different things happening on next week's show, so we'll break that down in time. But thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people covering every single sport you could want. So I know college football is the center of everyone's mind right now. The NFL is really heating up towards the playoff run. We have a number of different things happening around basketball. We have it all covered for you on the GSMC pages. So definitely come on here, and anything you need in the world of sports, we have you fully covered. But thank you so much for listening. I will see you guys on Monday to break down just about everything wrong with the CFP.
Mm-hmm.